Καλησπέρα σε όλες και σε όλους. Να πω αρχικά ότι στο διάλεξη αυτή το webinar θα βιντεοσκοπηθεί, οπότε αν κάποιος δεν θέλει να εμφανιστεί, καλύτερα να έχει κλειστεί την κάμερα. Και να πω επίσης ότι όλο το webinar θα γίνει στα αγγλικά, οπότε αλλάζω γλώσσα αμέσως. Dear President of the Hellenic Psychological Society, dear ex-president of the Hellenic Psychological Society, dear colleagues, dearest friends of the Cognitive Psychology Division, good evening and welcome to today's webinar. We are particularly happy to welcome in our series of webinars Professor Kathy Hirsh-Pasek. She's connecting from Philadelphia, USA, and she's going to present her research results and her wonderful ideas concerning playful learning and its importance as an effective learning tool for the 21st century skills acquisition. I will immediately give the floor to Natasha. She will say a couple of words on Professor Hirsh-Pasek's biography. I will just mention that her work, together with Professor Roberta Golinkov, on language development has been among my principal readings since the long gone days of my PhD research on language development, early language development. So for me, it's a particular joy to have her here with us. Dear Kathy, welcome to our company. And thank you so much for being with us this evening. We are looking forward to listening to your presentation.
So thank you all for taking the time to join us today. We truly appreciate your presence here, and it's my pleasure to introduce you our esteemed speaker for today's webinar, Kathy Hirsh-Pasek. She's a professor of psychology at Temple University and is also a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, where she focuses on education policy. She's a prominent developmental psychologist known for her research on early childhood development, language acquisition, and the importance of play in learning. Hirsh-Pasek won awards from every psychological and educational society for her basic science and translational work, designed to bridge basic science and educational impact. One of her notable contributions is her work on the importance of play in children's learning and development. She argues that play is not just a frivolous activity, but rather a crucial component of children's cognitive, social, and emotional development. Her research emphasizes the need for educators and parents to prioritize play-based learning experiences for young children. Hirsh-Pasek is also known for her advocacy for evidence-based practices in early childhood education and her efforts to translate research findings into practical applications for educators, policymakers, and parents. She has been involved in various initiatives aimed at improving the quality of early childhood education and promoting policies that support children's overall development. The Playful Learning Landscapes is an evidence-based initiative that blends findings from the science of learning with community-based participatory research to transform physical public spaces and educational settings into playful learning hubs. Playful learning landscapes reimagine cities and public squares as places with science-infused designs that enhance academic and social opportunities. Her latest book, Making Schools Work, Bringing the Science of Learning to Joyful Classroom Practice, is the first education book co-written with teachers, administrators, and scientists. It already sparked a national grant to reimagine education. Without further ado, I'll hand it over to Professor Hirsh-Pasek to begin her presentation. As we go along, please feel free to ask questions using the chat, and we'll address them at the end. Professor Hirsh-Pasek, thank you for joining us today. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Natasha. Thank you, Alexandra. Thank you, Nikos, for including me today. I thought I would leave it on this mode of presentation so that if you wanted to come in visually, you could ask questions. And if you have questions while we go along, then I can see you and we can have a conversation rather than my just talking at you. If I put it on the full presentation mode, I have no choice but to just talk at you. And this entire talk is how we shouldn't talk at people anymore. We should talk with people. So if you want to put your screens on and you want to join us, please feel free. Today, I'm going to talk to you about what I'm calling active playful learning for joyful teaching and deeper learning in and out of school. And I wanted to start with a wonderful quote that I saw a couple of years ago from Noah Harari. And he said, "The Industrial Revolution has bequeathed us with a production line theory of education." By the way, this production line theory of education is used everywhere in the world. I would have thought maybe in Greece it wouldn't be used as much, because you guys started with Socrates, but it seems everywhere in the world this is happening. And as he says, it's easy today to laugh at this model. And almost everyone agrees that no matter its past achievements, it is now bankrupt. In fact, in a recent cartoon that appeared in the US, it suggests that if Mozart and Michelangelo were students in today's American schools, they would probably fail the state exams and be kicked out of school. And that's very problematic. There's a recent report that came out from the OECD in 2021, and they suggested that in the US, in England, Austria, Iceland, Germany, Greece, I could name many other countries here, this factory model of education has led to what they call schoolification, the drumming in of facts. Even for young children, it's become a very factory-like school system where we transmit the facts into the empty heads of our students. And now we have started pushing down that formal education into early education. So the OECD now cautions us that countries need to ensure that curricula are age appropriate and that they balance play, self-regulation, pre-academic activities, and encourage pedagogical practices, which this is going to be a big part of what I'm going to suggest, that correspond to children's age and need in development. So I'm going to take a very radical approach here, especially since you are the Hellenistic Psychological Association. Here we go. What if we started to teach in the way that human brains learn? Now, I know that sounds radical and astounding, but we don't right now teach in the way that human brains learn. In fact, everything that we have learned in the field of psychology is that human brains are active, not passive learners. And yet we sit people in rows and we expect people to learn as we talk at them. So maybe we can change the way we think about learning and education. And this would apply not only to live education, but also our digital education and in and out of school education, and the way that parents and policy makers think about the social and academic value of an integrated education through play and active learning. And maybe it's time to finally understand that in the age of AI, with Chat GPT in everyone's hands right now, with so many apps, hundreds of thousands of apps that you can use at any age, maybe it's time to realize that learning does not just occur in schools. It is a surround sound endeavor, and it's happening everywhere. So what can we as psychologists do to help make this movement happen so that education in and out of school at least confirms a little bit or conforms a little bit to what we know about in the science? The exercise for me began when I really asked what counts as success for students. And that then translated into a bigger question. If we were to ask what we want students in Greece to graduate with, what are the skills that we think are important so that when they enter the workplace of tomorrow, or actually the workplace of today, they're ready for that workplace? Businesses have moved on. Schools have not. So I'd suggest to you there's a traditional way that we prepare children in reading, writing, and math, which, by the way, is very important. They need to know the reading, writing, and math. But maybe they need more. Maybe the 21st century way is to also prepare them to be happy, healthy, thinking, and caring, social human beings who are collaborative, creative, competent, and will become responsible citizens of a society tomorrow. Now, this just gives you a sense as you look around the globe that we've been narrowly focused on teaching to test for decades. This is a graph that Pasi Sahlberg shared with me, and he suggests using this if you look at the equity of education systems and you look at the equality of the achievement and how much people have or have not improved. What you're seeing is a lot of people are along the mean line, the slope here. I won't spend a lot of time on this graph because luckily there are some places that are ahead of it. Congratulations. But there are a lot of places that are right on the slope. And if you look, the United States, Britain are on the slope, and a lot of countries are falling beneath that slope. It's something we have to worry about. And we need to find out exactly what happened in Finland, what happened in Canada. Because Canada, by the way, just managed to move its education system up in the last 10 years. So in our books, Becoming Brilliant and Making Schools Work, and a Big Ideas report that I did for Brookings in 2020, we actually ask parents, educators, and policymakers to kind of change the lens on how we define success for children who are growing up in a 21st century. Now, I know that the term 21st century skills, at least in America and in Britain, is a hackneyed, well overused term. But I think if instead of just beating it around, we go back to the science and ask what that means, we can actually come up with a model. So I'm going to make the argument that in early education, and I will take that to mean all the way through age 12, in and out of school, children need to master a breadth of skills. And they need to master that breadth of skills through what I've been calling active playful learning. I'm also going to make the argument that active playful learning is coming back, and that in fact there is a rich research base to make this claim. So with that in mind, I'm going to give you a talk in 3 parts. First, I'm going to define what I mean by play in playful learning, because this is the most slippery slope in psychology today, or at least one of them. And I'm going to talk to you about different kinds of play, in particular free play and what I'll call guided play. The next, I'm going to talk to you about the science of playful learning, and I'm going to talk about research that supports how play can help with executive function skills and social learning, and also playing cognition. And then I want to get to the bulk of my talk, which is with that evidence base in hand, what are we supposed to do as psychologists? What is our role? And part of our role is to continue to do the basic science, but I'd like to suggest to you that our role as scientists is also changing, and we owe it to the ministries of education in which we live, the places where we live, to talk about how that science bears on our education systems. Happy to also tell you that UNESCO has a new movement that they are putting into place. It just started last year in a meeting in Paris, where we brought together scientists from around the world to talk about how you can apply the science of learning to what we're doing in education systems around the globe. So stay tuned. Let's define what I mean by play. The new approach is the science not of what we don't know, but also of what we know. What do I mean by that? Generally, as scientists, what we do is we look for the gap. What don't we know yet? What's the next experiment that we can do to address what we don't know and to, grain of sand by grain of sand, move the science forward? So I've been asked many times, so what do you know? You've been working as developmental psychologists in the science of learning for the last 25 to 50 years. Do you not know anything that you can share with ministries of education? So what I did with Roberta Golinkoff is to distill a set of principles about learning from the past 50 years of research that you all did, along with the globe of psychologists and what we know generally about human brains learn. And the first part of that is to define playful learning by how humans learn. What are characteristics, and this is a really hard one, so bear with me, that most psychologists would agree upon? This is a very hard set to come up with because we are a group that argues all the time. But here you go, best bet, and so far not a lot of pushback. I think we can assert that humans are active learners, not passive learners. We can assert that humans learn best when we are engaged in what we are learning and not distracted by things around it. We learn best when something is meaningful to us, not when it's disconnected. We learn best when it's social, not when it's solo. And I think we learned that in spades during COVID with school shutdowns. Children did not learn as well on their own when it wasn't through social interaction. And we can come back to why in a little bit. They learn best when it's iterative, when you change it just a little bit each time you read it and present it. And they learn best when it's something that they want to do, when they're motivated to learn it, when it's joyful. Now, guided play, which is a particular kind of play, is play that has a planned learning environment. So think about a Montessori education, for example, or a children's museum. It's very well planned, and the adults can become coaches in that environment, but they're not directors in that environment. So think about these two cases of what I'm calling guided play. A planned play environment where children have the agency to explore that environment toward a learning goal, and an environment where the adults are coaches, but the adults are not directors. So here's the way we've been thinking about it in our part of the field, our little nest, that when you have something initiated by a child and directed by the child, we could call that free play. When you have something that is initiated by an adult, like a setup in a museum or a Montessori school, but the learning is directed by the child, there is agency, that's what we call guided play. When you have something that is initiated by a child, and then the adult comes in and takes over, that's the worst kind. We could call that co-opted play. And what generally happens in those environments is that the children walk away. They just let the adult take over and they're not interested anymore. And finally, not play at all is initiated by an adult and directed by the adult, direct instruction. And I don't care how much you dress up direct instruction in play clothes, it's still direct instruction. So we really have to catch that difference as we move along. Another way of thinking about it that we brought into the research in, I think it was 2018 and 2021, but really an idea that Dorothy Berger had in 2008 was that play exists on a continuum. And here you see again, initiated child, explicit learning goal, no, that's your free play down here. Guided play has that goal, initiated by an adult, but the child takes the lead. Games look very much like that. This is not play at all. Okay, just another way of looking at it. So you can turn free play into guided play. So for example, if I have free play in blocks and I add making it more active, engaging, meaningful, social, joyful, and have a learning goal like, hey, let's build a castle. Then the child is rotating the pieces and arranging those pieces in ways that are helping him learn spatial organization. And that spatial organization has a lot to do with later math learning and STEM learning. Similarly, a very simple one is if on a playground, you have a pole and the kid's climbing the pole. A simple thing like adding hatch marks on that pole changes the pole from just going up a pole to how far did you get up the pole? And it becomes an opportunity for mathematics learning. So research suggests that actually when we do this guided play, we can enhance social regulation or collaboration, language and literacy or communication, STEM learning and literacy, reading, which is content learning, hypothesis testing, which is critical thinking, and even creativity. So it has enormous value. And the research also tells us that free play, wonderful though it is, if you have a learning goal, it does not get to the learning goal as well as guided play. In fact, guided play even does better in many cases than direct instruction. So let's look at the science of playful learning next. In play and social regulation, it has been shown by a number of researchers that play can be used to help in impulse and emotion control, self-guidance, planning, self-reliance, as well as in attention and memory. Meg McClellan has done some beautiful work, and I highly recommend her book, Stop, Think, and Act. And she has classrooms where kids conduct an orchestra, and every child uses a musical instrument, and the circle leader uses a drumstick as the conducting baton. Notice that for the kids to be able to all do what the conductor is doing, they have to pay attention. They have to recognize the beat. So they're doing beats and rhythm, which is STEM learning. They have to have self-control, which is executive function. And she uses these tasks in early education classrooms. The same can be said of drum beats, which is another task that she recommends. There's a paper that came out last year promoting executive function skills in preschoolers using a play-based program. Again, a lot of this research is starting in early education, but it applies as well all the way up to what I'm using as pedagogy in my college classes. It's very, very effective. They use 10 simple games and interactive games, red light, green light, Simon Says, and help children learn things like emotional control and executive function skills. Another, parent provision of choice. See that agency piece coming in? When parents allow kids more choice, then it turns out to support executive function skills. And many of you are going to recognize these people: Meg McClellan, Ellen Valinsky, Phil Zalazzo, and Stephanie Carlson, who are authors on this paper. Now, it doesn't just work in social skills. Guided play has proven to be very effective for learning in cognitive skills, in literacy, telling stories, wordplay, singing songs. And we've actually done research in these areas. So current research with David Dickinson and Roberta Golinkoff is asking how playful learning can increase vocabulary for children from under-resourced environments. You have an adult read a book to the kids, like Knight and Dragon. And thank you, Egaliki was wonderful in helping us determine which books to read, because she's done so much beautiful work in this area, while highlighting new words like galloping and shield. We put the kids in either a free play condition, where what we did is we said, do anything you want with these figurines that we're going to let you play with after you read the book, or a directed play where we said, go ahead, see if you can replay some of what you heard in the book, versus a guided play condition where we introduced what we call more open-ended questions, questions where we ask children to not just fill in a blank, but to expound on what they've learned and to get inferential knowledge. And we compared these three conditions and how the children played with the figurines. And our results suggested And I'm not sure that I totally expected this when I went into this research, but the free play condition was the worst of the conditions, not the best of the conditions. It turns out that when you have a clear goal, like vocabulary learning, and it's adult supported but child directed, the kids do better. And that was true in the directed and the guided play conditions. In our most recent, these are rather preliminary data, but also see some of the work that Galecki's done for years. We use different play activities like singing, large and small group games, drama. We looked at digital play. And what we found is that in the guided play conditions, the kids learned more of the vocabulary words than they did anywhere else. By the way, you'll love what was the absolute best of all of our different play conditions. It turned out to be singing, turned out to be music. We actually invented songs that went along with our vocabulary items. So you say, what about STEM? Finding patterns, dividing candy and sharing it, sorting trail mix, games like I Spy, noticing more and less, and playing board games where there's a lot of research by Romani and Sigler. In our own research, we used block play to ask if it might build better spatial and language outcomes. And it turned out that when children were playing with adults in block play, we got more talk about the bricks. Put the red one on top of the blue one. Put the blue one alongside the green one. And when you use spatial language more with kids, it matters because they learn more STEM. It translates to STEM learning. So we actually looked at that and we found out that if you work with 3-year-olds to increase their STEM ability, you get not only better results in what we've invented as 2D tests of spatial ability, that is, can you just follow what you see? And here you see stickers, and the kids get to do stickers in a 2D dimensional world and in a 3D test of spatial ability. And we call these tests the TOSA, the test of spatial ability. It predicts, get ready for this drum roll, please. It predicts their math ability at 5 years of age on a standardized test. Recent study confirms these findings that guided play, but not free play, even fosters children's academic self-confidence in science tasks. And playful learning also supports critical thinking and creativity. A lot of this work is coming out of Alison Gopnik's lab. Beautiful work, by the way, on curiosity and creativity. Finally, a recent review appeared on all of the papers that were out on guided play. And what did they find? This is coming out of Cambridge, that it works. And it works even better than free play, and it works better than direct instruction, especially when kids want to learn something like STEM, math skills, spatial skills, science skills. In a paper that's not out yet, but that I absolutely love, it's out of Liz Bonowitz, Alison Gopnik's lab. They asked kids to play different games. I love the title of this. It's Fun Isn't Easy. And they give either an easy game or a hard game. And in one condition, they ask the kids to choose because they're going to get stickers for their work. And they make it sound more like work than play because they're going to judge them. In the other, it's just for play. What did they find? The kids chose to do the easy task when they got stickers, but they chose the hard task to explore and discover when they were told it was just fun and they should explore. In a global white paper report that was published by the Lego Foundation in 2022, we review the science, not the one that just hasn't come out yet, but all the science thus far. And this is freely available on Lego's website. So we might ask several questions about why in the world would this be true? So big idea one for us is, well, look, active, engaged, meaningful, socially interactive learning is what psychologists have been saying forever about human beings learn. It patterns after what Mickey Chi had found so long ago. And so if they learn better that way, then voila, guided play must be the best way for them to learn. Big idea two is, well, guided play is like constrained tinkering. In free play, you have too many degrees of freedom. And with too many degrees of freedom, you can't stay focused on the learning goal. When we can prioritize certain hypotheses over others, we have a chance to learn more and to move more in the direction of our goals. In fact, this is a theory that Liz Bonowitz from Harvard has been working on for many years. Big idea three. This one I loved. It actually came from a lunchtime conversation with Jerry Bruner when he was still alive. He was approaching 100, and I remember Jerry really just didn't have the energy to go out and get lunch. So I thought if I went out and got lunch for him, I might be able to capitalize on having lunch with Jerry Bruner. Of course, I was so impressed and so excited. And when I explained to him what guided play was, he said, of course it works better. It's a mise en place, as in cooking. When you lay out everything ahead of time, and there's a positive disposition for learning and exploration, I know where I'm going. I know what to do next. And that makes me explore even more as I'm going along. So it creates a mise en place for learning, and that enhances what's going on in children's minds. Finally, big idea four, playful learning is joyous. And we know that when you have positive emotion, that helps with motivation and helps children learn. But I'm going to go with big idea six. Well, play allows us to develop the suite of skills we need to be successful in school and beyond. So early on, I asked, what do we want from graduates of our schools? And I think that at every age, we want them to be good collaborators, good communicators, to know the content, to have good critical thinking, good creative innovation, and confidence to give it a try, and perseverance. This includes confidence is a shoehorn C, only when you speak English, but it's for growth mindset and Angela Duckworth's perseverance. But notice that you can't have good communication skills without strong collaboration skills. We know this from brain research, that language depends on having someone to speak with. The content depends on having strong language skills, which depend on strong collaboration skills. Critical thinking and creative innovation both come from having good content skills, and then content is built on top. I should share with you, though, that all of this is developed from our own research that you guys have done as well. And you can see that in the research, it says collaboration starts by kids just doing it on their own, going to side by side, but not interacting, going back and forth, and then building it together. But I would argue that it's not just happening with little kids. In the workplace, there are people who just want to do it on their own. There are people who work side by side and never talk. Back and forth is I write the draft, I send it to you, you work on it, you send it back to me. But the strongest work comes if we talk together and we build the theory together. And this is a developmental model, both horizontally and vertically. So now, if you bought it so far, I want to show you what we're doing with this model as we move out into schools and as we move into the community. Let me pause here to make sure the model's clear. Have I confused anybody yet? Okay, and I'm not talking too fast?
Yeah. No, it's perfect.
Okay. Then let me go on to what I did with the model. Roberta and I decided to invent what we call the three-part equation for learning. And the three-part equation starts with community and cultural values. That if what you're doing doesn't make sense to the culture and community that you're in, no one's going to learn it. They're just going to dismiss it. Once you have that in place, you can add on top of that the how children learn, which is what we've been talking about before, that it's active, not passive, it's engaging, it's meaningful, etc. And then what children learn is the 6C model that I just showed you. So if I add community and cultural values, add the science of how children learn, and the science of what children need to learn, then you get a model. For community values, we've taken it seriously. Mostly what we have done in education is we go out into the schools with a curriculum that we buy from somewhere, and then we just use it. But we don't ever get input on how we can adapt that curriculum by engaging the teachers in the community or the parents in the community to ask what they know about it, what they think about it, how we can use examples from home to include in the curriculum, even if we bought that curriculum, to make it work. So we engage and we plan with the community as a first step. While we do that, we actually have gone to playing a game with people. What's important to you? We would like to create something, fill in the blank, while upholding which values? What's important to you? While making sure people who are what? Who are under-resourced, who are neurodiverse, feel welcome and feel included while part of this school, app, or landscape. And they choose the words that fit that. And what we have found is that as they do this, we found amazing things in a Latina community in Santa Ana. We adapt things to cooking. You can teach math through cooking. And that happens to be something that everybody's really invested in the Latina community. So if we just use familiar icons, familiar stories, familiar cultural narratives, we can make learning much richer. We then add the science of how and the science of what. And we have applied this model in 3 different places. One is in the school systems. In Making Schools Work, we detail how we've used this model in the state of New Hampshire and in the state of Massachusetts, as well as in schools in the state of Pennsylvania. We're working in what we call playful learning landscapes to transform communities. And we're also applying it, to media, where one of our recent pieces was on Chat GPT and what that's going to mean for the age of creativity. So let's look at how this plays out. I should tell you that all this is backed by a strong research base. What we do first is we do proof of concept by doing the basic research and publishing it. And then once we have the publications, we move into the more applied domains. Ministries around the education are beginning to embrace a whole child approach. I should also tell you that we're starting to see this. This is just 2 places, in Singapore and in Ontario. But laws have also been passed in India, Thailand, Vietnam, and Ghana, among many, many others. And the UNESCO is coming out in March, just a month away, so get ready, folks, with a new approach that they're calling the Happy Schools movement to try to change public education around the world. So this movement is now off the ground, and get ready, it's coming your way. The question, of course, is even if you pass a policy, how do you implement it? And that's a real problem. In places like Vietnam, in Ghana, and in South Korea, they have laws that are passed, but the teachers have no idea what they're doing with those laws. And in fact, when you don't distinguish between guided play and free play, what happens is the schools just become free play schools and the kids don't do well. And then everybody's wondering why. In Germany, when I gave a talk like this for the Bryce organization, which is a large research project going on in Germany right now, one of the questions I got was, yeah, well, we've tried this and it doesn't work. And I said, well, what have you tried? I get that Germany's Ministry of Education passed a law, but if all the kids are doing is playing in the classroom, the kids aren't going to learn the learning goal. We already have research that tells you that. So how do you implement is a real issue, and we try to show that in the book, Making Schools Work. So here we go, and here's our research so far. In suburban Philadelphia, we decided to train teachers. It was a relatively affluent school district with a median household income of $62,000. I don't know how that translates in Greek, so you have to help me out here. But this is a good school district, and it's kindergarten teachers. They learned lessons around how children learn and around the 6 C's. And we found that a greater percentage of kindergarten and first grade students demonstrated grade level math and reading skills after the teachers changed to this system than before. And that is striking because this was already a middle income school district. So there wasn't a lot of room to move up. And nonetheless, they did better. There was a decline in special education and in occupational therapy referrals by first grade. A 79% reduction in special education, which was stunning. A 20% reduction in occupational therapy, and a 13% increase in kids' standardized test scores. So everybody said to us, yeah, well, what about if you went to the poorest communities? So we did. We went to a place in rural Western Michigan, a small community district with 78% of the population was Hispanic and Latino. We have a paper that has been submitted on this work. 95% of the kids are in the US what we call free lunch, which means this is the one meal they get a day that people trust is actually a very healthy meal. We did thematic instruction that was rooted in active playful learning in the 6 C's with a district-wide K to second grade focus. What did we find? Benefits for students and teachers were reported across the district, gains in first graders' math and reading scores, but as importantly, the teacher said that it gave them more ways to express their thinking, and it helped the teacher understand that there's more than one way to assess somebody's learning. It changed the teacher's mind and made teaching more fun for the teachers. We then went to New Hampshire. The entire state of New Hampshire decided to pass a law mandating play-based learning in their kindergarten. 31 kindergarten classrooms, 6 months, we did what we called an embedded coaching program. And we trained coaches to go out into the schools and work with teachers every other week. What we found is that the teachers loved the system, said they thought their teaching was better. In the United States, after COVID, many teachers are leaving teaching, and in these systems, they want to stay. We also got significant retrospective increases across students' 6 C's. As one teacher put it, this paper just went back. It was a revise and resubmit, and so we just resubmitted it. I grew so much in letting students make choices, see that agency thing coming up again, in their learning, and relinquishing my need to control and give them a sense of their own ownership. The natural, mostly positive social interactions I was able to observe between my students was endearing and incredible. My students were given the opportunity to be joyful learners as they deserve to be. This is just a snapshot of some of the things that we saw. The kids increased in their collaboration scores. They were talking more. They were asking more questions. They were using more manipulatives, and the level of involvement was greater. Notice, by the way, over here, this is the direct instruction control group. And you can see these numbers are all less than the play groups, with guided play leading the way. So it's pretty stunning. Finally, we were just given a large grant by the Lego Foundation to scale some of this and study it in school districts in California, Illinois, Virginia, and the state of Texas. We're going to be going into 25 schools, 15 experimental and 10 control, with 3 teachers per grade per experimenter schools. So it's a very hefty study, and we'll let you know. But we're very excited that our team is pulling together this research to see how it can work on a scaled model. But mind you, we're also applying the same equation to what's going on in communities. Children in the US and in many countries only spend 20% of their waking time in schools. They have summer vacation. They don't go to school on the weekends. They're done at 3 o'clock in the United States. So the question we asked here is, what are we doing with the other 80% of the time that children aren't in school? So I'm just going to rush through a few examples. Again, all this stuff is published now because we started just seeing if it would work, and we were astounded by the findings. We decided to go into supermarkets. We literally just put in signs in under-resourced areas, and they were dumb signs. Like one of them was a cow, and it just said, "Hi, I'm a cow." It was an undergraduate who drew pictures of the cow and said, "I'm a cow. I have milk. What else comes from milk?" And then we did one here where we started with a little sign that said, "Did you know there's learning in these aisles?" All right, what would happen when the signs were up and when the signs were down? This was first published in 2015 under the title Supermarket Speak. And we found out that when the signs were up, parents and children put their cell phones down. The parents put their cell phones down and started talking to their kids. And the language went up by 33%. I mean, when's the last time that any of us got an intervention that changed behavior by 33%? Insane. So a couple people didn't believe us. So Melissa Libertis at Pitt with her student Hanner decided to do it for signs, STEM signage, and she found the same thing. Susan Newman said, "Well, I wonder what would happen if you put it in laundromats." Same finding. Then Susan Hespos, who was at Northwestern, is now in Australia, said, "Oh, come on, do you think it would work in food pantries? Go ahead, try it." Same result. So it seems to be a pretty hefty result that when kids see the signage in supermarkets, they respond. Then we thought, let's get bold. What would happen if we change public transportation? This was a very crazy idea by a scientist named Kathy who had zero idea what that meant to change bus stops. I learned there's all these regulations that cities put in for bus stops. But we went out, we met with the community, the city worked with us. This was a wonderful project that a guy named Itai Palti, who's an architect from Tel Aviv, and my former student, Brenna Hossinger-Das, now at Pace University in New York, worked with the community and said, "What do you want to do here?" They said, "Well, it's land where Martin Luther King, who's a very famous guy in the United States who helped with civil rights in the United States. This is the land where he gave one of his speeches in a freedom march. We want to celebrate him." Well, you can make puzzles out of anything. So we made a puzzle of Martin Luther King. And we know that puzzles that a lot of these kids don't have at home, puzzles help kids in STEM, learning spatial skills and later translating to math skills. The research was already there. Some from Susan Levine's lab at University of Chicago as well. So we put 3 puzzles up. We also put a host of other games on this very small plot. 100 community members helped us to design and build the site. They were also the data ambassadors collecting the data. And what do we get? A 28% increase in adult-child language in targeted spatial and number use. Well, in Santa Ana, the community said, "I'm sure we love Martin Luther King, but we're from Mexico. We want to do something that's going to reflect our culture." And so we're bringing the game Loteria to them. It's a game they played in Mexico, and it will be going up in a bus stop in about a month in Santa Ana, California. We also invented, with Andy Bustamante, now at the University of California, a new game called Parkopolis. And we just put this in the park. Notice carefully that it's a human-sized board, but here we changed what dice do. Everybody told us that kids have a terrible time learning fractions when they're in 4th and 5th and 6th grade in the United States, which would translate to being about 11, 12, and 13. So what if the dice were in fractions? And what if you created a hopscotch game where you had to put 2 feet where there's 1 and 1 where you see 2? I think that's executive function skills. And what about if you had a shape zone where you had a cross all in the same shape, or a number line where kids cross the number line? Well, we did this. We wanted to see how it changed behavior. And indeed, it did. We got much more targeted language in precisely the areas we hoped to see. We changed a library. Here's an example of our library where we made a climbing wall out of letters in a very under-resourced area. And all of a sudden now, the kids like to play by spelling letters, spelling words as they climb up. Over here, you can see that we made a puzzle right inside the stacks of the library, and you take these out and it becomes seating, and the children learn how to make different spatial configurations to create the seating in the library. Here, Andy Bustamante again, he created Fraction Ball. The paper was published in 2022. It's simple. You go out and paint a basketball court. By the way, we're working on geo soccer, so that we can have something that will stand better in Latin America and also in Europe. But the idea is a very simple one. Here's the 1 or 4/4 line, 0.75 or 3/4 line, and you shoot the baskets. The other kids add the scores, and the kids have to get to a certain number without going over, or see if they can hit a number exactly. Ta-da. We put this in the schools for these 4th to 6th graders, 160 kids, and in 4 15-minute physical education classes that were out, on the playground of the school, 4 of them, they came back and they knew fraction decimal conversion, and the teacher got a week and a half that she didn't have to teach fraction decimal conversion. It was astounding. Here, in a school called Bright Horizons, which is preschool, we just invented what we're calling the story wheel. So you spin the story wheel, and who do you think invents the who for the story wheel, the context for the story wheel, the what happened as the conflict, and the resolution? It's teaching narrative structure, but it turns out the teachers in the school and the parents in the school all gave us ideas about what they wanted their stories to be. The kids spin, and they get to tell their own stories at the end. This is a game we call, it's like Dance Dance Marathon, where it's a gizmo that you get in. One group picks the pattern, and the other kid has to dance the patterns. And so they're learning patterns, which Bethany Bertenthal tells us that's related to later math learning. We also are doing murals up. This is an easy way to go because you just get someone in your community to paint a mural. But as part of the mural, you figure out an I Spy game, training in memory and attention, kind of like a Where's Waldo. In Philadelphia, they didn't want the same mural that they wanted in Santa Ana. So this is what the mural looks like in Philadelphia. And one group is actually doing murals in hospitals where children spend a lot of time waiting with their parents. Generally, what you see is parents on a cell phone and children just sitting there. But the minute we put the murals up, the kids and the parents started talking with one another. And it was astounding how you could change the hospital environment. So phones down, conversation up. I just wanted to show you that even in classic environments, we were asked if we could come up with some designs to be used in Venice. As you probably know, they had some floods there around San Marco Square. E.T. Palti came up with these designs. Remember that hopscotch game I showed you? This is how you can work it into classical design. It's exactly the same game, but now it's working within Italian architecture. And here what we did is we used Italian symbols in an ABA, ABA, or ABB, and we asked if kids can actually go across the path to follow the AABs or the ABAs. Can they figure out the game? Right now, we're still calling it analogy stepping stones. It was an idea that first came from Dedry Gentner, But please understand from all of you, generate ideas, because this is limitless what you can do. And these are some of the designs we did for that. Finally, we have playbooks that are out in English, in Spanish, in Chinese, and in Portuguese. And at Brookings, we also came up with a metrics so you can see how it's working in your community, both for the community members and for use, so the cities can see how the cities are really changing to help put learning right into the architecture. And I think of this as creating the next piazzas, piazzas which are imbued with the science of learning. Finally, this is just to say we are using the three-part equation to develop culturally rich education in the media sector. I wrote a piece a couple years ago about looking forward to what we might do when education meets the metaverse. And then just last week or a month ago, I guess, Apple Vision Pro came out. So while it ain't perfect yet, I think we're going down that line. We have a lot of research that we have published in this area to back up what we are doing. And so the question I think before us as researchers is, how do we take the science and how can we think of ways to make science edible? And what I mean by edible science is accessible, digestible, and usable. And once we do that, are there ways in which we as scientists can do a better job of interfacing with policymakers so that we don't just publish in our journals, but we also make what we do more actionable? So I'd like to suggest that the three-part equation can reimagine education in and out of school. It's just our imaginations that will take us there as scientists. And we need to have the courage to do that. This is a picture of Roberta, who's always happy, and some of our funding sources. And with that, to say that I'd love to hear your questions and your comments. So I'm going to stop sharing so we can all have a conversation.
Thank you so much, dear Kathy. This was very inspirational. There are so many things to comment on.
Go.
Perhaps someone would like to ask a question directly.
Did I confuse you all? No? Yes? Yeah, go ahead, Maria.
Hi. Thank you so much for this fascinating talk. It is so inspirational. And to be honest, I feel a little bit frustrated because I've seen the gap between what the standard that you have put in front of us and the level that I feel that our educational system is, and the distance that we have to cover, but this is another story. Anyway, thank you really for this wonderful, very inspirational talk. I have two naive questions, but please allow me to put them, to tell them. Those data that you shared with us about the guided and the directed play and how they facilitate learning more than the free play was unexpected for me, and I'm just wondering if the learning acquired by these two types of play is as stable, I would say, as the learning acquired by the traditional way.
It seems to be so far, but to be honest, we haven't had longitudinal studies, so I can't answer that definitively. However, I will give you a longitudinal study. So I started using this method in my college classrooms. And what I do is I have my students, I rearranged the honors program in psychology so that I have them over the course of a whole year. So I reach out to them before I have them, and I say, and I take hot topics and I say, okay, what are you guys interested in? So this particular semester, we're studying what I call the computerized you. What is the impact of AI and digital learning going to be for you? And what do we know about its psychological impact for learning, for writing, for communication, etc.? So they chose to have that topic. And once they chose it, I teach a methods class, psychology methods, which I'd always found to be rather boring when I took it. And I map studies that are in the literature from the computerized you onto the topics that we're going to be learning in the methods class, okay? And I drag the methods class out, as I said, to be a whole year long, so that we can both learn with a more lecture format and then discuss what the papers are telling us, what we think, and what the next study should be. All right, so every semester, they seem to come up with some new topic that they want to learn about. My tests are all essay tests, so they have to write something about it as opposed to multiple choice, guess, whatever tests. And my students, 3 years to 4 years out, remember not only what we've learned in the class, which is astounding to me, but they tell me they remember the themes that we studied. And while they can't name the authors of the papers, they know what they read and how to do a good argument. And they're graded on the 6 C's. So I'm thoroughly convinced from that this method can go all the way up. I was very afraid to do my first tests of the theory on kids who were older than pre-K and, K1, so up to like age 8. For the Lego project, we're going up to 4th grade, so they will be 9-ish, 9 and 10. But I was afraid to do that because I didn't want to go too far out of my lane. Now, I know that sounds ridiculous given what I've done so far. I'm so far out of my lane that I'm probably the rogue scientist at this point. But I thought I should at least stay with younger kids who I knew better and try it on my own classes. But every year at the end of my college classes, I also meet with every student for 5 minutes, which is a lot. Doesn't seem like a lot, but boy, do they appreciate it. And I have them rate themselves on the 6 C's. And I have them do that at the beginning of the year, bring it with them, and then tell me where they think they are at the end of the year. And did they use what they learned in this class? So I'm really interested both in stickiness and generalizability. And I asked them, did you generalize what you learned to any other class? And they said, absolutely. And once we did, it's taken us less time to read in the other classes. It was easier to write the essays in the other classes. And they felt like they really were learning more than just memorizing. Okay. So that's the best I can give you for Does It Last?
Thank you. Thank you. I think I will skip my second question because there are other people who want to ask questions, and if not, I'll come back again. Thank you, Kat.
Sure. Anybody else?
There was a question on the chat by Maria
Yes,
Capita.
I asked, thank you very much for this presentation. It was really helpful for me to have more arguments in supporting playful learning.
Thank you.
Coming from the field of early childhood education, I was wondering whether the move from free play to guided play, which is very crucial, and teachers play a very important role, can also be the other way around. For example, whether children who are trained in this kind of thinking can then make their own learning goals through free play and have a kind of development. Yeah.
I think we haven't looked at that, but it's a great question. What we absolutely know at this point, because I always wondered, why was direct instruction always doing better than free play? Why? And Marie, I have to admit, I had a book that came out in, I guess, 2000 called Play Equals Learning. And a number of people came up to me and said I would regret that title. And I said, no, I'm not going to regret the title. I think it's absolutely right. And then I came to regret the title because it wasn't the case that free play was as good. Here's why I think the literature has come out the way it has. I think direct instruction, what it does very well is it constrains the space, the hypothesis space, right? And once you've constrained the hypothesis space, you're more likely to focus on the relevant things and not the irrelevant things. So the question then became for me, could I find anything where I could get that constraint, but at the same time allow children the agency to do what I thought was so important in free play? So as a first step, those of us who are doing research in this area think that this lowering of the degrees of freedom is actually an important piece. And now we're doing a lot of research to capture what's so important about agency. And why I love that new paper that Allison Gopnik and folks came out with is I think it is true that kids will work on harder problems if they are given an opportunity to choose those problems and the stakes aren't so high. And I think if all it's about is how well you're going to do in the test, you've narrowed the degrees of freedom, but they're just spitting back. They're just spitting back what you've taught them. And that's horrible. They don't generalize and it doesn't stick. So, you know, I'm trying to find a midway position that can be supported by the science. So I think your question's a really good one. Go research it.
I would add to that testing has a negative part of a negative evaluation is a risk, and we know very well that in order to be creative and learn, you have to be flexible and not fear risking.
Exactly. And another piece to that I think is going to be more important even now than it was, you know, when I first started on this adventure. I mean, gosh, you know, Chat GPT was only introduced a year and 2 months ago. You know, that's to my mind, it's a game changer.
It's a game changer that urgently asks for the development of critical thinking to be used appropriately.
Exactly. And so if we can develop educational systems with outcomes to the educational systems that prioritize the 6 C's with, you know, curiosity and creativity and critical thinking, and I think all of us as psychologists are in a position to do that, then I think we have a retort to what's happening in the broader world with AI. And it's very interesting. I just have to give you one student comment in my honors class. So I was teaching, you know, honors last November when ChatGPT hit the scene. And I told them, you know, I think it'd be really fun to use ChatGPT for your final. Go ahead, do it. And turn in what ChatGPT gives you and turn in what you would have written or how you made it better. You know, how did you make it better? So they came in, you know, and they're like really confused. My students, there's 40 of them. And I said, what's wrong? And they said, truthfully, if we had turned in what ChatGPT gave you, you would have given them a C- or a D. You would not have passed it. And I said, okay, why? I mean, the critical question, right, is why did you think that? And they said, it's a bad synthesizer and it's not a critical thinker. And the thesis was not creative at all. And I said, boom, you have just solved the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. So the content will be very easily available, but how you compose it and how you revise it critically is at stake. Yeah. Is there another question? Okay.
Maria, you're on for question 2.
Yes, I'm ready for my question 2. I was wondering again about what distinguishes. I mean, many things are distinguishing the free play from the guided play. Is feedback one of these? I mean, is there feedback? What about feedback? Do they, the children as they play, do they get feedback when they are engaged in a guided or directed play, as opposed to the free play that maybe they don't have any feedback? Does this change the way they learn?
I love this. I mean, I don't know why I didn't think of it, but you have added a whole new dimension to what I should be looking at. Thank you. Of course, it has to, right? Whether it's feedback that's generated from the kid herself, right? Because the puzzle piece doesn't fit.
Yes,
Whether
or
it's
by the adult.
Or by the adult who's coaching. Yeah, you're right. You're right. It redirects.
Yeah. And the feedback can be direct.
Yeah.
Verbally expressed, or even, physically or emotionally, or any other indirect way, which leads the way to the child to go this direction or the other.
Absolutely brilliant. Anybody wants to work on it, let me know.
Okay.
I would I love that. Has to be.
And it can be connected with what Maria said. While you were speaking, I was noting here the ingredients of the recipe of play, of guided play.
Yeah.
And I have at least 20-25 words on a page. One that is related to Maria's observation about feedback is the word non-judgmental. That the context of play usually is a non-judgmental context of working on things. So I guess that this feedback inserted into a play context. And another thing that I have noted is that play for children is a very, very well practiced template. And everything you insert into a well-practiced context, anything new, is very easy to assimilate, to absorb. Just
that's
random
good.
thoughts.
I'm writing these down. Keep going. And this is why we've got to always keep talking to our colleagues, because you always find something good that I need to think about. Thank you.
We thank you very much.
Well, thank you. This was so much fun, and I'd love to stay in touch. And if there's anything you ever want to do on these issues, please be in touch, because I'm doing a lot of cross-cultural research now, and just want to continue to do it. And at Brookings, that's what we do. I'm with the Center for Universal Education, and all the studies we're doing are international. So thank you. What a pleasure.
Thank you so much, dear Kathy, for being with us.
Bye.
and
Nice
for
to
the
meet you.
inspiration. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.